Hey everyone and welcome to Storytime. My name is Jake and today we are going to be looking at the subreddit r/maliciouscompliance, where people conform to the letter but not the spirit of a request. If you're new around here, please do hit subscribe down below so that you never miss out on another video. But for now, let's sit back, relax, and enjoy some malicious compliance. Love Me Tender. The company with whom I was working decided they were going to kick off a drilling campaign consisting of 6 deep, bigger than 5,000 meter wells. Since I had been involved in several similar campaigns over the years, the onus fell upon me to take their idea and drive it to fruition. Since this was going to be a multi-million-dollar project, it had to be tendered and vetted through the various local ministries before it was allowed to commerce. This required several hundred pages of technical jargon, considerable amounts of time, money and effort, as well as quotes from at least 3 pre-approved drilling companies, for comparison's sake, before being advertised for all and sundry to make their bids. Generally, there was a non-refundable tender fee, usually a percentage of the total, so that everyone concerned wouldn't devote any effort with time wasters, such as small or shady companies with less than adequate resources who try to lowball and win tenders, then farm out the actual work. Trouble was, these were complicated wells, consisting of several potentially nested horizons with H2S, thief zones, heaving shales, multiple casing runs, salt horizons, overpressure, coring operations, and generally unfriendly drilling conditions. The tender was explicitly clear as to the type of rig, casing scheme, mud system, sampling, logging, and analysis while drilling, ad infinitum. These were all approved by the various ministries, and a baseline comparison for each well was determined to be $28 to $30 million each, given the tender specs. Also, although we're in the Middle East, the lingua franca was noted. All tender offers must be made in English. So the tender was made public, given a drop date, and we waited the obligatory 14 days for the offers to flood in. Since oil and gas exploration had been in a coma for the last few years due to saggy oil prices, there were a fair number of big rigs around the world sitting, stacked, or mothballed. Seems everyone with a static deep rig was slathering over a nice, juicy 6-well, year-plus contract. We received tenders from Russia, China, India, several from the Middle East, and even a couple from the US and Canada. It was incumbent upon me to review the tenders and make choices of the best 3 to submit to the ministries for their final go-ahead. The key requirement for these wells is that the rig chosen was required to at least a 4,500 horsepower top drive system. I'll spare you the technical minutiae as to why, but that was written in stone. No variance allowed. The fact alone scrapped 50% of the tenders, as the rigs were less powerful, though they claimed that with an aluminium drill pipe and downhole motors, they could do the job just as well. Sorry Charlie, that dog don't hunt. After poring over the received tenders, we decide that there are 3 that fit the bill and are submitted to the ministry for their final approval. Their bids were close, all with a variance of about within 5%. They each passed the requirements of the tender, and any one of them would have been a good choice. That being done, we now wait on the final approval of the ministry. A few weeks later, we're called into the ministry for a meeting. Evidently, none of the submitted tenders were approved for one nonsensical reason or another. They took turns berating our company for taking too long, i.e. following ministerial dictates. Our apparent lack of rigor and other such forms of fabricated nastiness. They toss us a document, not in English, and demand that we utilise this company in our campaign. Since it's a ministerial dictate, we are basically left with 2 options. Number 1, tell them to screw off, pack up shop and hit the road, or number 2, do exactly what we are told. We chose the latter. We had the document translated to English, and find the company for which this is written is owned by some shirt-tail relation of one of the recently retired head ministers. It was a cobbled-together drilling company specializing in shallow wells, so it's obvious that they could handle our campaign of deep, hazardous, nasty wells. That's a bit of sarcasm for the cynically impaired. Several times we approached the ministry to get this overturned, citing such trivialities as the fact the drilling company has never drilled any wells close to this level of complexity, hires untrained and inexperienced hands, has an abysmal safety record, and is generally the worst choice for a project of this scope. We were told, in no uncertain terms, that we have no say in the matter and that the tender will be followed to the letter, using nepotism drilling company's rigs and hands. There is no room for discussion. The tender will be enforced, as written, and as signed off by the ministry for the amount quoted in the tender, which was at least 25% greater than the real tender offers we have procured. We were told not to bother the ministry with the matter any further as they consider it closed. No further changes will be considered. We had the ministry sign off a codicil to that effect. We signed and started preparation for the campaign. We sent the spec sheets off to the drilling company to at least try and salvage some portion of the project. We receive static. Letters, emails, phone calls, and even visits to their offices are all rebuffed. I decide to contact the 3 companies we had originally selected and put them into a holding pattern, citing ministerial difficulties. We continue to get nothing from our selected company for weeks. I have one of my comrades in another nearby country covertly contact them, asking about their rig capacity and capabilities. Turns out, the largest rig they have is an old Chinese 1500 horsepower rig, nowhere near the size, power, nor design needed for our uses. But the ministry said we must use them, and by terms of the tender they all signed off on, they must provide us a 4500 horsepower rig with all the deep goodies. Their silence was explained. They were scrambling to try and find a rig they could rent and still keep to the tender. Trouble was, those rigs are scattered to the 4 corners. Virtually every drilling company knows the story. Word travels fast in the patch, and refuses to deal with them. Panic sets in for the drilling company, as it is a time-bound ironclad contract for which they had put up a 10% surety bond immediately after tender, around about $18 to $20 million, through an international bonding company. With 2 weeks left until the term expires, we suddenly start getting phone calls, emails, and the like from our drilling partners. Can we extend the terms of the tender? Can we drill top holes with a smaller rig and leave the heavy stuff for later? Can we farm out the project to another driller but still remain on the tender? We formulate our answer, and since we were expressly told by the ministry that they figured this was all done and dusted, not to bother them, and the tender is ironclad, our formal answer was, and I quote, no. The tender expires. Nepotism Drilling is out around about $20 million in bonds and is forced into bankruptcy. All their materials are repossessed. Seems this wasn't the only problem they were having with being overextended. The tender relet and their base shuttered. The retired head minister takes an unexpected trip to Europe and hasn't been heard from since. We drill with one of our first choices and hit 5 for 6. Would have been a grand slam, but we found a new oil reservoir uphole, and it couldn't be counted in the final tally. However, it did open a new field and set off yet another campaign. That was one of the most formal letters I've ever seen, just N-O. Wow, so beautifully written. No vacation? Malicious compliance with IT policy. My father had a job as a mainframe operator for a company that had contracts doing work for state governments. involving a lot of data processing. His job involved babysitting a group of servers and rebooting them when the monitoring software said they hung, occasional minor programming, and annually talking to the auditor, the state, whose contract he worked on sent in. The auditor loved him because he always ensured that they had detailed records ready. Also, the contract specified that absolutely everyone on the contract had to be a US citizen. And the auditor was always demanded names and social security numbers. He had about 5 years to go to retirement. In 2 years, he would be eligible to retire. 5 until he maxed out his benefits. They really desperately needed somebody to take in the night shift, so he took it. He would be allowed to work from home full time, and he would be retiring soon anyway. And he would save a young married family person co-worker from having to do it. Every fall, he and I have a week's vacation together in Disney World, because he owns a timeshare there. One year, almost 3 years into the 5, he showed up looking kinda steamed. So, after we checked in, I asked him to spill the beans. It seems that his company had decided to sell off the division, and they were purchased by an outsourcing company in India just the week before. The new company told him he'd have to attend some mandatory meetings during our vacation. When he explained that he had a vacation booked for that time and would therefore be unable to attend the meetings, they said, "No, you don't. Your vacation time was accrued with the old company, and they approved the vacation time. You have no accrued vacation time with us. So, if you want to take the time, it'll be unpaid, and we'll note in your HR record that you demanded time off without approval." He and I had a few $1,000s sunk into the vacation. So, he said, okay, and took it unpaid. When he got home, he immediately looked it up and figured out that if he retired in a few months, instead of waiting 2 more years, he would get about $50 a month less money. He decided that the money was worth it to him, so he started the process. The new employer instantly hired temps from India to work on the contract. My father pointed out to them that he was responsible for proving to the auditor that only US citizens in the US were working on the project. So, the company flew them to the US. He pointed out to the employer that they still weren't US citizens. They shrugged, and he figured out that he would be retired before the auditor came around again, so they could deal with losing the contract after he left. He printed copies of his emails to them saying, "You can't do that or you'll lose the contract," and their emails to him saying they didn't care what he said, and kept the prints to cover his behind. Meanwhile, the new company announced that he had to have a cell phone. The old employer had skipped that because everybody knew that cell phones don't work at his house. No coverage from any carrier. But the new company had a hard-on about it. He had to spend several hours doing paperwork about it, and then they sent him one. It didn't work, as expected. So they demanded he bring it into the office in person, which ate a couple days of his work time, because he had to get a day schedule and then spend a day driving it in. Then go back to a night schedule. When he drove it in, IT looked at it, and of course they found nothing wrong, because there was cell coverage at the office. So IT took that one and they sent him another one. Lather, rinse, repeat. Then he had to get back onto a day schedule for them to send a technician around to determine where at his house there was acceptable signal so they could install a booster. This took several days of his work time, and of course, the tech was amazed that there wasn't any place at his house with any signal at all. They finally sent him a third phone, and he put it in a Ziploc bag and put it aside. Dad had a Windows XP laptop for work, and the current version was Windows 7. He's not an "I refuse to upgrade" person. The problem was that the company refused to pay for upgrades to the monitoring software for the mainframes, and the version they had would only run on XP. The IT department for the new company really wanted everyone on 7 and off of XP. He and all his co-workers refused. However, Since they all worked at the office, they'd come in one morning and find they had a shiny new computer which wouldn't run any of their software. So, they were an entire staff of IT professionals getting paid a salary to twiddle their thumbs. My dad wasn't there, so IT couldn't get their hands on his laptop, and he became the only person who could tell what the servers were doing. IT got increasingly nasty about it, until they finally cut him off the network entirely, and he had to get his boss to intervene. The time finally came for him to retire. IT had been nagging him several times a day to make an appointment with them on retiring day to give them his laptop and the unused cell phone. And he had to have a goodbye meeting with his boss anyway, so he was going in instead of mailing things. When the day rolled around, he went in, and IT met him first, and took the laptop to be wiped and disposed of. Then he met with his boss. They chatted for a while, and then it occurred to the boss that the laptop kind of mattered because it was literally the only computer left in the company with which they could run the vital monitoring software. My dad said, "Oh, IT took it from me an hour ago to wipe it." Then the boss actually screamed, "No!" and ran out of the room. My dad waited a while and left. He never saw the boss again. I can only imagine how good of a relief that retirement probably was. Like just getting nagged day in, day out, and then finally just being able to go, you know what? I'm finished, finally. Hey guys, if you didn't already know, I actually have another Reddit channel, which is based on like the shorter, kind of funnier subreddits. So if you want to check that out, that'd be really appreciated because it's like kind of jokes and yeah, you might like it. It's my voice. It'll be in the description as my other Reddit channel, and it's Fake Jake if you want to just type it in on YouTube. Hey everyone, I hope you all had a really good day and that you enjoyed that video. If you want to check out some other videos, then click on screen right now or check out the playlist down below. If you enjoyed that video, then please do leave a like. And if you want to submit your own stories, then you can do so by joining the Discord in the top link in the description. But thank you so much for watching, and I will see you very soon.